Lesson 3 is called the distributive property. And before we jump into the distributive property, I want to go through another order of operations example. So in this example, we have 2 times the quantity 4 plus 3. And we know if we were going to simplify this expression using order of operations, we would start with what's inside parentheses. And inside parentheses here, I just have 4 plus 3. So since 4 plus 3 is 7, I would then do 2 times, remember there's multiplication here, 2 times 7, which is 14. So that's simple. We know we can find the answer. It's 14, so keep that number in your head. But what the distributive property is it's a different way to simplify expressions that look like this. So the distributive property says you multiply what's outside parentheses by each item or term inside parentheses. So for this example, the 2 is outside of parentheses, and the 4 and the 3 are inside. So the distributive property says, well, you can just do 2 times 4, and then you could do 2 times 3, put them together, and you'll get your answer. So sometimes you'll hear me call this the double rainbow because you can kind of see there's a double rainbow, though if there was an extra number in here, it would be a triple rainbow. But let's go ahead and figure this out. So 2 times 4 is 8. And 2 times positive 3 is positive 6. And so now we have an expression that no longer contains parentheses, and we can add this really easily. 8 plus 6 is 14, which, if you'll remember, is what we got before. So this isn't necessarily a better way of finding the answer, it's just a different way of finding the answer. And you might be thinking, why do I need a different way? Order of operations work just fine. And of course you're right. So let's look at another example where we may really need the distributive property. So here we've got 2 times the quantity n plus 3. And if I wanted to simplify this using order of operations, I would do what's inside parentheses first. But here I have a real problem because I don't know what n plus 3 is. This problem didn't give me a number to plug in for n, it just said simplify. And since I can't do the addition because I don't know what n is, I need some alternative way of simplifying the expression and getting rid of the parentheses. So I'm going to use the distributive property, and I'm going to multiply what's outside parentheses by each term inside. So I'm going to do 2 times n, and then I'm going to do 2 times positive 3. 2 times n is just 2n. That's the only way I can write it. Again, I don't know what n is. So the best I can do is to say 2n, which means 2 times n. And then 2 times 3, it's positive 3. 2 times positive 3 is positive 6. And if I want to simplify further, I could try adding these terms together, but again, I'm stuck because I can't add a term with a variable to a term without a variable. That's just not going to work. These are called unlike terms. And so that's actually as simple as I can get. So I simplified this using the distributive property to remove the parentheses. Let's try example 3. Example 3 will have 3 times 2x take away 6. So again, what I need to do here, because I can't subtract these, they're not like terms, I don't know what x is. So I'm going to have to use the distributive property if I want to simplify this expression. And the distributive property says multiply what's outside parentheses by each term inside parentheses. So I've got 3 times 2x. And let's just come to the side here and think about what that means. 3 times 2x. I hope you remember that 2x means 2 times x, so I could put another dot there. And even though I'm not going to be able to get rid of my variable, I don't know what it equals, so I can't really absorb it into the rest of the problem, but I do know that 3 times 2 is 6, and I could bring down the times x. And remember, 6 times x can just be written as 6x. So coming over here, 3 times 2x is just 6x. So that's kind of my first rainbow. 3 times 2x is 6x. And then next I have to do 3 times negative 6. And I have some reminders over here. That's a positive 3 times a negative 6. And a positive times a negative is a negative. So I've got positive 3 times negative 6 is going to be negative, and 3 times 6 is 18. And since this has a variable and this doesn't, they're not like terms. I can't subtract them, and I'm just going to box it in. Couple more examples. Let's do example 4. For example 4, I've got negative 5 times 8x take away 3. And my first rainbow is going to be a negative times a positive, and a negative times a positive is a negative. So I've got negative 40x. Negative 5 times 8 times x is negative 40x. And then here, be really careful. It's tempting to want to bring that subtraction sign down, but don't do that. This is a negative 3. So I've got a negative 5 times a negative 3. And if you'll look over here, a negative times a negative equals a positive, which is a little strange, but that's how it is. So negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15. So it's really important that you don't just bring down whatever sign is there, but you really think if your answer is negative, you would have a minus. If your answer is positive or your product is positive, you would have a plus there. One more example. We're going to incorporate a fraction here. So 1/3 times 9t plus 6. So I've got to do 1/3 times 9t. And 1/3 times 9 is really the same thing as 9 divided by 3, which is 3. So 1/3 times 9t is going to be 3t. And 1/3 times 6, it's a positive times a positive, so I know I'm going to end up with a plus here, is the same thing. So 1/3 times 6 is the same thing as 6 divided by 3, which is 2. So 1/3 times 6 is 2, and since this term has a variable and this term doesn't, I can't get it any simpler, and I box in my answer. So that's how you simplify expressions using the distributive property.